Tansi yesterday shared the key learning or the key finding from our sustainable market share index last year. And just for context, for the new learnings, let me just remind everyone of what that is. And I'm going to be sharing my screen right now. Okay, so what we found in looking at consumer packaged goods is that sustainably marketed products accounted for about 16.1% of the market in 2019, but disproportionately delivered growth in CPG of about 55%. So 16.1% delivered over half the growth in CPG. And this was a stunning finding that has armed sustainability managers to talk about the business case for sustainability. It's also armed investment or portfolio managers to go to where the growth is. Everybody needs growth, as well as manufacturers and retailers all looking for growth. I even recently saw this finding cited in a Series A raise up for a new company. So with that as context, let's talk about the questions that we faced and were interested in answering this year. So this was a unique year, and we were interested in whether sustainable products survived the pandemic. This is the year-end result. I would say that prior, or just as COVID was hitting, I saw a lot of argument and discussion around the fact that sustainability will not survive the pandemic, that consumers will be too focused on security and safety and kind of cede their interest in sustainability. But equally vehemently, I heard arguments that this will be a watershed moment for sustainability, that it will thrive and people will rethink sustainability and their priorities in this COVID time. So let's answer the question. By way of background, let's look at the category. So this is in-store performance of CPG. This is the category. And what you see is the category, for as long as I've been competing in CPG, has been kind of a sleepy category, 1 to 3% at least for the last 2 decades. And then COVID hit, and you see an 11% year-to-year growth. And in particular, this is week by week performance of the category. You see March, which is where we were last year at this time, seeing unprecedented growth of about 41% in the month of, in a specific week of March, 31% in a specific week of March. So how did sustainability marketed products do? Did they survive? In fact, they did beautifully. Sustainably marketed products actually mirrored the CPG growth. And in that COVID week, we saw even greater growth of sustainably marketed products. And unlike what could have happened, which is a trough happening as people pantry loaded in March, we saw that they held their own against the category. And so we were really excited to see these results. And what that all translated to is that the share of sustainably marketed products continued to grow in 2020, another 0.7 of a share point. I will say that I've been asked many times from people about the role of out of stocks, that they were going down the aisle for in cleaning products, and they only saw some of the sustainably marketed products like 7th Gen or Method, and they didn't see any of the Clorox products. So perhaps that's the reason that sustainably marketed products did so well, is that the others weren't available. An analysis we conducted separate from this suggested that was not the case. We excluded the cleaning products from our analysis, and sustainably marketed products still grew above the category growth. The other thing that was not included in the analysis, but I do want to sensitize everyone to, is the emergence of carbon labeling. So in the 2020, we saw about $1.3 billion of sales for really just 2 companies, some Procter SKUs or products, and some Church and Dwight products, talking about the fact that that they are now being manufactured with 100% renewable energy. We expect this to continue. Unilever has announced that they will do carbon labeling on 70,000 of their products, and they actually will probably go a bit further by including the carbon footprint or the amount of greenhouse gases that were emitted in the manufacture of the product. So this is something we're going to continue to monitor. Again, it was not in the 16.8 that I just quoted share of market. Obviously, with another $1.3 billion, that will have an even stronger share in 2020. So in sum, sustainably marketed products did survive and thrive in the pandemic. So the second question that was posed to us was from the Green Chemistry and Commerce Council. They were interested in understanding what's happening to products that are formulated with greener, more sustainable, more safer products. And they were interested in understanding the consumer demand to work with manufacturers and retailers and chemical companies to put more investment and innovation behind these products. So we did engage in a very similar analysis. We partner with IRI, who's been our wonderful partner. A call out to Larry Levin and my two interns, Larry Levin from IRI and my two interns, Ali and Jean. Thank you very much for your help. Here we examined 10 categories. Again, in store, 10 categories, some of which were subsumed in the earlier analysis of the 36 categories we looked at, anywhere from sun care to skin care to de-icing and paving to pool chemicals, and looked at how products that were more sustainably formulated or greener formulated, how they performed in market. And what we found is that green chemistry formulated products are growing and grew from 10.1% to 14.3% in 2019. And in 2020, which I don't have here, it's up to 15%. So a 50% increase in share in just 5 years. So really impressive performance. But what was even more exciting is that, again, we're seeing that the small green chemistry products are differentially contributing to the growth of the category. So 14.3% share delivered 61% of the growth from 2015 to 2019. Moreover, green chemistry marketed products grew 12.3 times faster than their conventional counterparts and 5.3 times faster than the market. So we were delighted to deliver this news to the Green Council. A report will be distributed in June, along with some macroeconomic trends on green chemistry formulations with 2 other universities with which we collaborated. So now I'm going to turn to the last question, which is a novel question, has not been answered, and I'm excited to analyze and report on this, which was, how have sustainable products fared in e-commerce? Let's look at e-commerce as a percent of CPG. So historically, and when I first started examining these categories, on the far left, you see that e-commerce was just 7% of all CPG purchases and predominantly non-edible, meaning non-food products. And by 2020, given the pandemic, we have food products, we have everything coming through e-commerce. And so now it accounts for about 18%, just under a fifth of all CPG purchases. So we wanted to look at what's happening. We had 2 hypotheses as we went into this analysis, looking at sustainable purchases of e-commerce. One was, the first hypothesis was that sustainably marketed products would actually do better online than in-store. And that's because we believe that the e-commerce purchaser more closely aligns with the sustainable purchaser profile, demographic profile. Younger, a bit more tech savvy, a little wealthier, as we saw it, and I'm talking 70,000 and above, not top 1%, more urban. And so we expected that e-commerce shares would be higher for sustainably marketed products than in-store. The second hypothesis that we posited was whether that perhaps sustainably marketed products, while doing beautifully, may have not kept up with category growth in 2020, as a number of first-time users have come into the market, and not necessarily a demographic profile that I just outlined. So a lot of older users, retirees who are no longer going in store this year because of the fear of COVID transmission. So let's see how these hypotheses bore out. Again, we partnered with IRI. Here we used a different set of data, and it's their e-market insight data. Very similar analysis, except the universe is different. Here we looked at all the e-commerce sites. So this is e-commerce of the Walmarts and the Targets, and we'll be hearing from Walmart shortly. Amazon, any Instacart, any delivery like Fresh Direct, any delivery that's coming to your home, ordered online. And then we also had visibility to the e-commerce of some specialty stores that we had not been able to analyze prior to this. So the e-commerce of Ulta's and Sephora's as it relates to skincare, Chewy as it relates to Petco, and Petco, Vitamin Shop, GNC. And so let's look at what the results said. So here is what's happened with e-commerce in the past 2 years. So a 40% 2-year CAGR. And if you look at just the last year, you saw a 60% growth in e-commerce for CPG versus its prior year. So to my hypothesis, did sustainably marketed products fare well this year, given the number of new users, first-time users that aren't necessarily the demographic profile? And I'm very happy to report that the hypothesis did not hold up. In fact, sustainably marketed products actually outgrew slightly the category for e-commerce as a whole. So what you see here is that just in the last year, again, the category grew 59% on the 35 categories we looked at, but sustainably marketed products actually grew 65%. So definitely outperformed, and we are really happy to share these results. And to the second hypothesis, do sustainably marketed products fare better in e-commerce because of the alignment of the demographic profiles? And in 3/4, and the answer is yes, in 3/4 of the categories that we looked at, shares of sustainably marketed products are stronger online than in store. And the way you read this chart is that the green lines are the delta or difference between sustainably marketed share in e-commerce versus sustainably marketed share online. And I believe one of the reasons that sustainably marketed products are doing so well, in addition to the demographic profile of the e-commerce purchaser, is that you have much bigger real estate. So the medium helps. You have more real estate than a package, you have more information, and you also have the retailers helping to guide consumers to more sustainable practices. And this will continue to be driven. Walmart will have an announcement later in the year about this. Amazon's announced their climate-friendly pledge. So we are delighted to see that the retailers are helping to drive adoption of sustainable products. So in sum, I continue to be really encouraged by the consumer dynamics at play here. And this year in particular, I just think was a confluence of 3 factors that resulted in a perfect storm. You have sustainably marketed products, particularly appealing to the younger user, that is the future consumer, so everybody needs to pay attention to that. You have a focus on sustainability in a year of COVID, and then you have a move to e-commerce that allows, through the medium, much more real estate to communicate the sustainable practices, and for manufacturers, a very efficient way to talk about them. And so thank you for allowing me to share that data, and I'd love to get more insights from my two panelists that I'd like to invite to the stage. Jane Ewing, SVP of Sustainability at Walmart, and Raphael Bemporad, the founding partner of BBMG, which is a brand consultancy firm focused on sustainability. And I don't see Jane here, is that correct? Okay, I'm going to start with you, Raphael, while we're waiting for Jane, if that's okay.
There's a note for you, Randi, to click the apply button, or that may be for Jane. She's in the waiting room.
Okay.
I think, to arrive. Yeah, for
Okay.
Jane. So
yeah. Okay. So welcome, Raphael. So what do you think? You focus on macro trends of consumers. What's happening that's driving this?
So first of all, Randi, it's a delight to be here, and thank you for including me. I'm Raphael Bemporad from BBMG, as Randi shared, and I just also wanted to note that I have the honor of being on the advisory board with Tansi for the Center for Sustainable Business at Stern, and I also have the opportunity to teach in the Business and Society department. And the thing that is so exciting is that for a long time, when you're thinking about consumer trends, there has always been a gap between intent and action, or a gap between aspiration and action. And the data you just shared, Randi, that looks at the SKU level of purchase has closed that gap. And it's starting to demonstrate that the behavior of the consumer is now catching up with the aspiration of the consumer. And I think that's for a lot of reasons. The thing that I'd like to underscore is, if you look at it the sort of category level, which you've just done, I'd like to put that in a cultural context and what's happening outside of the category, and understand where things are moving. And so just this last year, BBMG, our team, in partnership with GlobeScan, did a survey of 27,000 respondents in 27 different countries. And we complemented that with ethnographies in the United States. And this was all in the summer of 2020 through the fall of 2020. And it was very profound when we were looking at the data and where the sort of macro trends were going. There was a very significant difference between those who are over age 30 and those under age 30 as it related to sustainability and social and environmental issues. And I would say just sort of one macro issue that I'll start with, and then we can turn it over to Jane as well from the retailer perspective. But what we noticed when we were looking at the difference between older generation and younger generation, and it wasn't just Gen Z or boomers, it was actually a dividing line closer to those under 30 and over, based on those who moved into adolescence in 2003, 4, and 5 with smartphones and social media. It turns out that if you're a digital native and you moved into adolescence with social media and smartphones, you actually have a slightly different orientation towards all of these dynamics than those who are older. So the main headline that I'd like to share is that I'm not sure that humanity has faced so many confluent challenges at one time. So in the macro view, what's happening in our world, what's happening in culture as it relates to sustainability, is you have human beings navigating the pandemic, an economic crisis, a racial justice reckoning, a climate crisis, and now even a conversation about democracy, and even knowing what a fact is or what a truth is in a post-fact world. And in the swirl of all that, we asked a very simple question. As you think about the post-COVID recovery, God willing, one day, knocking on wood, would you prioritize restructuring our economy so that it deals with climate and inequality, versus would you prioritize getting back to normal as quickly as possible? And young people under age 30, dramatically, 60% said they want to restructure the future. They don't want to go back to whatever normal meant. They're ready for something more systemic and more structural for change, so that we deal in our economy and in our society with issues of climate and inequities. And at the same time, their expectation for businesses and brands to lead the way on those multiple crises was significant. 81% of people under age 30 believe that brands are an essential part of the solution to the challenges facing humanity. I think that's in part because they see dysfunctional politics. They don't see government solving the problems as quickly as we need. And so on one hand, this context of so many challenges and changes at once have young people thinking, I don't want to go back to normal. I want to have more substantive change. And then number two, I actually am looking to brands to lead the way.
So interesting. Thank you. Welcome, Jane.
Hi, Randy. I'm so sorry about that technical hitch.
Not a problem. I'm delighted you're here. I'm interested in understanding how you view the role of retailers in driving sustainable practices. I know you've partnered often with manufacturers. I know consumers are asking a lot of you. You just heard from Raphael about the expectation of brands. Can you talk a bit about that as a SVP from Walmart?
Of course. Thank you, Randy. And, it's super important, we think, that the private sector, and that includes retailers, can and must lead in this space. So, when companies like us take a future-looking, longer-term view that actually addresses the needs of customers and associates and suppliers and communities and the planet, then clearly more value is created for everybody. So, including shareholders. So we think this multi-stakeholder approach is really critical. But Randy, clearly no one organization can do this on their own. We've got to think about how we bring about progress on sustainability. And the way we look at it is through climate, nature, waste, and then people in supply chains. And it really does require an all hands on deck approach from both business, government, and from society. So, here at Walmart, the customer is number one. We talk about the customer all the time. And as you shared with us earlier, an increasing number of our customers are passionate about sustainability. The data that you shared, that over half of growth in consumer packaged goods comes from sustainably marketed products, just proves that point. So our customers really expect us to do the right thing, and they want to do their part too. So when we did a study recently, and we found that customers, they're concerned about using less plastic, they want more recyclable packaging, they want to reduce food waste and chemical use in products, and they want to increase healthier food options. So they want to feel good about shopping with us and about the products they buy. And for our part, we want to ensure trust and transparency. And we know we have to earn that trust. And we work really hard to provide products for our customers that provide information about sustainable practices, whether it be things like Marine Stewardship Council on seafood, fair trade, Rainforest Alliance certifications, and things like that. And then we also really promote the use of labels like how to recycle, which help give customers information on what they can and can't recycle. Essentially our customers, they're voting with their dollars, Randy, and they want action on environmental and social issues. And we believe it's an important part of our role to listen and act because, it's the right thing to do, but it's also good business. Great.
And as we talk about social and I know, Raphael, you mentioned this as well, this social justice desire and unrest. What do you think is happening? Can you talk a bit about what you're doing? I did see, Jane, that Costco and Walmart, I believe, are increasing the minimum wage, which I was so happy to see. Can the two of you, I don't care which order, talk about that? Raphael, maybe we should kick it off with you in a macro sense.
Sure. I really appreciate that because one of the dynamics that happened in this last year was the orientation of social issues and brand choices. And so on the social issues side, 73% of young people under age 30 support using public protest as a way of raising awareness of issues that they care about. And in the United States, 1 in 5 young people personally protested in the streets last year, 20%. And when you think about it through the brand or the company relationship, we also heard, which in the United States, young people are twice as likely to strongly support boycotting brands who they believe are irresponsible. So when you're thinking about these social dynamics inside the organization, we're thinking about, justice, equity, diversity, inclusion, and we're thinking about our teams and our suppliers. In society, it's a balance of willing to put your life in public, and sometimes because of COVID, your health on the line, to stand for an issue that you care about. And social justice and climate are actually the two things that brought people, along with gun safety, to the streets. And then they're also connecting those dots to the brands that they choose, and being willing to boycott brands that don't share their values. And in the ethnography, we actually heard someone say, I'm willing to switch brands if a brand doesn't share my values on social justice, even if it inconveniences me. She said, if I have to change my habits and inconvenience myself, I'll do that to find a brand that aligns with my belief on social justice. So very passionate and deeply felt emotional commitment to these issues.
Jane?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, Randy. It's absolutely spot on what you've said. And, at Walmart, respect for the individual is one of our core values. And we've long worked to be an equitable company and to do the right thing every single day. And, one thing I'd specifically like to talk about, since the tragedies last summer brought the issues of systemic racism into sharp focus, we've really been working hard to accelerate change inside and outside of me. So what we did is we developed some new strategies and investment of new resources to work on increasing fairness, equity, and justice. And we've looked at 4 key areas: healthcare, financial systems, education, and then the criminal justice system. And, really starting to make some good progress. But we know lots more have got to be done. So, we looked at our own operations. We increased our reporting on diversity of our workforce and identified new ways the business can really make a difference. And we actually created what we call shared value networks against those 4 areas that I just mentioned. And they are really looking to address the root cause of racial disparities in our communities and to see how we as a company can help support that. And then to complement that work, with the Walmart Foundation, we've committed over $100 million in a new Center for Racial Equity, which is focused on really addressing the drivers of systemic racism and helping research, advocacy, sharing best practices and convenings. And we think that, we really hope that can make a big difference. And then just finally on this point, as a global company, obviously we have operations outside the US. And I think, the challenges and opportunities and solutions can often be applicable elsewhere. So we really believe it's the responsibility of business to respect human rights. And we aspire to use our capabilities and our influence to bring about positive change at scale. And that could be things like, investigating root cause issues, embedding responsible sourcing practices into our buying decisions, and then working with key partners and stakeholders to prevent forced labor, address unsafe working conditions, and promote the dignity of women. So really think this is a holistic approach that's important, Randi.
Great, wonderful to hear. I'm going to pivot a bit to private label or store brand. So in our analysis, we didn't have transparency to private label, but having worked in brand forever and speaking with some manufacturers that we are partnering with, what I'm hearing is that historically it used to be brands kind of led the way on the new trends, and then private label kind of came in with the lower price and mimicked what happened, or store brand. Now I'm hearing from the manufacturers that actually private label or store brand, in many cases as it relates to sustainability, is kind of leading the way. How is Walmart thinking about that as you think about your store brand and the sustainable practices that you're employing?
Yeah, well, first thing, as we've already talked about, customers expect us to deliver products that are good for them and their families and the planet, and irrespective of whether they're choosing a national brand or a private label brand. And our role is to exceed our customers' expectations. And if we do that, it can really help increase supply chain resilience, build transparency, and build trust. So we have an incredible private brand team here at Walmart, and they work tirelessly to offer products with sustainability attributes. And I have so many examples I could share. We don't have time, but a couple of my favorites are we have some jeans called Time and True, and they're made from recycled polyester. And then we have some reading glasses from the Equate brand, which is one of our private label brands. And the frames are made from plastic recovered from oceans. So, they're just two examples, and we have many more in the pipeline as well. So, really trying to embrace this concept of circularity in our own products. We believe it's really important to move away from this historic take, make, dispose approach to one where materials can stay in use, and really thinking about end of life when we're developing a product, not after it's been used. So I'd also say, more and more customers, they want the assurance of certified products. So things like, our coffee sourced for our US private brands is certified sustainable through Fair Trade and Rainforest Alliance and UTZ. So, and we have many private brands with certifications and things. And we've committed to sourcing at least 20 key commodities, things like cotton and beef, more sustainably by 2025, and we're well on the path to doing that. And then I would just like to share that, both with our private brand and our national brand suppliers, we work with them through a platform called Project Gigaton. And the idea of Gigaton is to avoid a gigaton's worth of emissions from our supply chain by 2030. So what this does, it allows us to work with suppliers, as I said, both national brand and private brand, to identify the right targets for them, to track and report progress, and really allows us to hold each other accountable on our shared goals on climate. So we ask them to raise the bar, not just on climate emissions, but on areas like energy and waste, packaging, agriculture, forests, and product use and design. And we support them on this journey by offering tools and workshops and initiatives. So if there's any suppliers on the call that want to get involved, then please just let us know. I'm thrilled to share that we have over 3,000 suppliers have already engaged since we launched in 2017. And we've reported over 375 million metric tons of emissions avoided. So I think, it's a really great way for suppliers to get involved and to make a difference to our customers and the planet at the same time.
Oh, great.
And Randi, if I could build on that
Please.
From the human side, on the climate, the consumer side, I'm so appreciating what Jane is getting at, because it matches quite elegantly the cultural side of the story. One of the things that significantly spiked in 2020 over our previous conversations was the way that climate moved from being an issue out there one day to an issue right here and now in my own life. And so looking at folks' experience of climate, whether it was like the wildfires and the orange sky of the West Coast earlier this year, the frequency and intensity of hurricanes, the flooding and the droughts, the extreme weather events, we asked, to what degree have you been affected by climate change personally in the last year? 68% of people under age 30 said that they were greatly or moderately affected by climate change in the last year. And then the way they were feeling about sort of the environment and their role and their behavior, 61% of young people in the United States feel guilty about their negative impact on the environment with their behavior, and 40% felt shame about their impact on the environment in their own behavior. 40% of young people compared to only 19% of those over 30. So, significantly, you're starting to see that this issue of climate, you mentioned Unilever, 70,000 SKUs now going to talk about explicitly, labeling about carbon and a footprint. that's tracking actually to where the culture is going. And just to conclude on this, we heard from one of our respondents, her name is Kat, she's 25 in Los Angeles. She said, I'm wondering right now if it's unethical to have children. She says, the climate crisis is one of the things that scares me the most. And when I think about the future, I wonder if it's unethical to have children because of it. Like, that's very profound to go from it's a top 5 issue to it's something that's affected my life and I'm feeling guilt and shame, to I'm questioning whether it's ethical to bring a child into the world. We're in a new territory emotionally and culturally, the way that climate is going to be showing up. And I think what you're mentioning at Walmart or at a P&G and a Unilever, taking this in, not only seriously on the systems design, but on the way that this frames a cultural story and a way of being together, it's moving and we're in a new moment.
Oh, great. Thank you. So before I open it up, I just wanted to ask you, do you have any last questions of what the future last comments on what the future will bring as it relates to sustainability? How are you feeling? What role will it play? What does the future look like? As a prognosticator, Raphael.
So the way we're thinking about it is that we're at a moment for brand leadership that has entered an era of shifting paradigms, no longer just shifting preferences. It used to be that, like your data is tracking year over year, you could add a benefit or a claim and try to navigate like incremental improvements on products. And that remains important, of course, but we're actually, with the 5 sort of black swans that are happening at the same time, we're actually needing to lead in a whole new way of thinking about paradigms. And so our team at BBMG has created an ethos for brand building called Regenerative Brands. And it's rooted in 3 capacities that have to be cultivated to lead. One is aware, which is to be aware of these deeper emotional truths for consumers, but also aware of your own brand's impact, positive and negative historically, on what consumers are yearning for and what they need in their lives. The second capacity is to be additive, which means that you give more than you take in an interrelated, interdependent ecosystem of value. And then ultimately what you give back into the world, society and climate and environment and nature is more than you're taking from it. And then the third is being alive, which is being alive in culture, creating energy and momentum by designing with people, not just for them. And we're in a moment where the paradigms are shifting, not just the preferences. And so to be a regenerative brand that isn't just sustainable or resilient, but actually is in a creative relationship with people and with nature, so that we are aware, additive, and alive, and we can ultimately repattern the way that brands and commerce help human beings thrive and flourish in relationship with nature.
Thank you. Wonderful way to end that. Jane, do you have any thoughts on what the future holds?
I would just echo what Raphael said. This whole concept of regeneration is critical. And, we announced at the end of last year a commitment to become a regenerative company. And so it totally aligns with what you've just been saying. I mean, that means we made commitments to get to zero emissions in our own operations. We've made commitments on helping reverse nature loss, waste, etc. So we've made some pretty bold commitments, but we know that we can't do it on our own, and that collaboration both with our supplier partners and our NGO partners is critical. But although we're in a very difficult time, there's so much to be optimistic about. I think companies coming together and making these commitments means that we can actually drive the change that we need to see. So it is going to take all of us, Randi, individually and collectively, taking really bold action now. And I really think we can create a regenerative future for the planet.
Great. And can you just elaborate a bit more on your comment around partnering with manufacturers? I remember years ago, you partnering with Procter and driving a compact, lower plastic package on detergent. And that really was revolutionary. And I recall everybody being concerned about kind of the size, smaller size and fewer what we would call facings. But because you drove it and you're such a big player, all the other manufacturers needed to follow. So as you think about this year and in the future and partnering with manufacturers, what role are you going to have to push them to adopt, some significant sustainable changes?
Yeah, it's a great question. And the good thing is, we're all on the same page in terms of where we need to go. And the laundry example you just gave is a great one. And we're working on those all day and every day. The Project Gigaton platform that I shared with you, that's a perfect, platform. It's a collaborative platform that we can set goals together and drive for improvements in all those different areas that I talked about, from packaging to emissions and so on. The other thing I would say, Randy, is we're starting to work more with our supplier partners on developing transformational approaches at landscape level. So right down in the supply chain, and these can impact entire ecosystems. So we call them, place-based partnerships. And, a good example is we've been working with Cargill and McDonald's and the Walmart Foundation together with the World Wildlife Fund. And the idea is to bring more sustainable regenerative practices to the beef industry. So this particular one is in the northern Great Plains, and the idea is to improve the health of over 1 million acres of grassland by 2025. We've got other examples that we're working with Unilever and Nestle in Sabah, Malaysia, around deforestation-free supply chains. So there are many examples of that, and I think the future, maybe it's the answer to your last question, but part of the future is in these place-based solutions that we work on together to really make a difference at that landscape level.
And maybe the last question before we need to close is, the research that we've engaged in is really domestic in the US, but the two of you have both talked about the global landscape. Are you seeing differences in the US versus the rest of the world? Or do we lag? And do you have any comments on how or are we ahead? And do you have any comments on how to address the US versus the globe? Raphael, you want to kick that one off?
Well, it can depend on sort of the category and the context. However, at the macro level, when we were talking about this sort of sense of urgency for the moment and a desire for more structural change, that sort of frame that we began the journey with on this, if you do look globally, while it was 60% globally, and that's the same in the United States, it was 77% of young people in Latin America, 72% of young people in Africa who are looking for more structural system-wide change. And so I think I would say the United States is somewhere in the middle to a little behind, certainly Europe or Latin America on some of these dimensions, but it often depends. But the headline, and I'll just reinforce the optimism that Jane shared, is that young people do feel a dynamic tension of the urgency of these issues that they see more seriously than older people. But significantly, young people believe 64% globally believe that tomorrow will be better than today, and that their children and grandchildren will have a better quality of life. And I think it is this recognition that we're in a moment of great challenge, but also of great opportunity. And that this is a moment not just to think a little bit, but to think bigger, and that we can do this together. People, society, and brands all creating significant change.
And Jane, in the last 30 seconds, any comments on global landscape?
Yeah, I would agree. I think US is sort of middle to behind. And if you look around the world, there are some advancements in other economies around really driving circular economy. And, I have a ton of examples I could share, but we don't have time for that. But, Europe, Latin America, Canada, they're doing some things faster around, reducing plastic and driving for circularity. So I think there's a lot we can learn from other parts of the world.
Thank you so much. And thank you to my esteemed panelists. I do see a bunch of questions, and I'm hoping that Raphael and Jane will engage with me to provide answers if we've not addressed your question in the talk. And thank you. Thank you so much for joining me.
Of course. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Randi. So I'm delighted to introduce the last break. We will reconvene here in about 15 minutes for our final programming of the day. We'll hear from a collection of business leaders in a conversation hosted by Valerie Keller and Paul Pullman, co-founders of Imagine. And then at 1 p.m., we'll hear closing remarks from Tanzi Whalen, the director of the NYU Stern Center for Sustainable Business. So we'll see you back here at 12 p.m. Eastern Time in about 14 minutes. Thank you.